Hello, my name is Naive Libertarian Politics, and today we'll be doing the 11th episode of the History of the Republican Party series. And in this episode, we will be doing the true beginning of the six-party system, as previously there was an overlap period of the six-party system beginning in 1968, even though it says 1980 now, and the fifth-party system ending in 1976, which created a little bit of an overlap period. And something I would like to actually bring to notice for the viewers is that this has recently been changed. There has seemed to be a little bit of a Wikipedia edit war, as I believe this used to be, like, only a couple hours ago. This is my sixth or seventh time recording this video. This actually I believe used to be 1964 or 1968, and this used to be like 1968 or 1972. It's funny, you know. It's somewhat funny, I would say. It's a little bit of a Wikipedia edit war going on, but that's just a little bit of a footnote. So to get what we're actually talking about today. This episode we will be discussing the the presidency of Jimmy Carter and how Reagan was able to take advantage of the events during his presidency, which led to his loss in 1980. Spoiler alert. That Reagan was able to take advantage of those, and how he was able to take advantage of those and become president for another 8 years after that. So let's get straight into it. So first, we have a graph from energy.gov. It shows gas prices since 1929. So we have current, we have constant 2015. So that means this is all 2015 dollars, because if you didn't know, the dollar in 2015 is not the same as a dollar in 1959 because of inflation. So you can, and there's also current gas prices, which basically means at 1929 they'll be talking about $1929. That's why you can generally see prices go up, because as we get closer to now, inflation also goes up. That's why you can see near the end it kind of starts matching up, because at $2015 are $2015, and then really that starts at 2013, around 2013. So you can see that around the late 70s, gas prices they had already jumped up in the early 70s. They started to take a huge hike in the late 70s, and that was during Carter's presidency. And the thing is, most gas shortages and gas price increases are usually the fault of politics. And when something is the fault of politics and politicians, when it comes to gas prices going up, people usually get angry about it, and they vote out the politicians. So of course that was not a good look. Next thing is not really Jimmy Carter's fault, as it's been happening for the entire nation's existence, but I did talk about it a little bit a second ago. Inflation. So here we have inflationdata.com's graph. So you see you have inflation bumped up in the 20s and then started falling down, and in 1940 it started going up, and then in 1970 that's when it started skyrocketing to such high levels as we have now. And you can see that it started in 1970, and it was not a good look for Jimmy Carter, but it was not his fault. It generally was not a good look for anybody. The president at the time always had to deal with inflation. It was not a good look for Nixon. It was not a good look for Ford. It was not a good look for Carter, and it surely was not a good look for Reagan. But he had enough good looks that he didn't really need that. The final one I want to talk about, and probably the biggest one, is the Iran hostage crisis, which was when people at the American embassy were held hostage in Iran for almost 2 years. You can see it was about 1 year and 3 months. It lasted from about a year before election day in 1979, or a year before the election day in 1980, and ended on the day that Reagan was inaugurated. So, make of that what you will, but you can see that it was a terrible look for Jimmy Carter. I do not think it was Jimmy Carter's fault necessarily. but it was bad place at a bad time. Which it caused him to lose popularity rapidly, and in 1980 it all culminated in the form of an election in 1980 in which Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter 489 electoral votes to 49 electoral votes. The only states that Jimmy Carter really won were his home state, and some key Democrat states, and D.C., which is not a state, and one of the Democrat states which happened to be the home of the Vice President Walter Mondale, or at least his birth state. And you can actually one of the main reasons that Ronald Reagan one of the main reasons Ronald Reagan actually did not take all these huge even more states is because John B. Anderson, who was a liberal Republican, he was a more moderate, you'd call him a rhino nowadays, lost the nomination and ran as an independent and was able to attract 5 million voters to his cause, which caused, of course, effects in states where votes might go to Reagan, like in Minnesota. If John B. Anderson had not run, and presuming that every single one of those voters would have gone for Reagan, which is obviously not true, he would have won Minnesota. If the same had happened in all the states, he would have won Hawaii, Maryland, Rhode Island. He would have had a huge victory. But of course, that did not happen. That is just speculation. But you can see that it was a huge victory, and this actually marked a huge, and as well as being a huge victory for Republicans, it also marked what I believe to be the beginning of a huge separation within the Republican Party between the moderates, which were called Rockefeller Republicans, the liberal, moderate Republicans, and the conservative Republicans, the Main Street Republicans, which exists to this day in the form of Trump versus Romney, the Trump types versus the Romney types. It exists all the way to this day. It has existed for a long time. I think this is one of the biggest examples of it, because a liberal Republican literally ran as an independent to make sure a conservative Republican did not win, but of course that did not end up working. And well, you can see because Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter in a huge landslide. So Ronald Reagan would go on to be a fairly popular president. His highest approval rating would not be the highest, but he was still a very popular president. You can tell that because if you ask people who were president, most people that were president during Reagan, a lot of them have very fond views of Reagan. And if he must have done something right if he was popular if people who were under him are fond of him, so he obviously was doing something right. So 1984 comes around and Democrats already have no chance. So they go ahead and they go ahead and nominate Walter Mondale. The Democrats are in a little bit of a frenzy. They nominate Walter Mondale, who wins the majority of the delegates, but not the most states. That actually goes to Gary Hart of Colorado. Walter Mondale would actually he would not win the most states, which is not the best sign, but he also won a large percentage. He won a huge majority, almost over 800 more delegates than the second most person who has the second most delegates, Gary Hart with 1,164. It has even been said by Walter Mondale that when the election came around, he knew he was not going to win. He said the only time he thought he had a chance was during the presidential debates when Reagan stumbled over his words in the first one, and he embarrassed himself. But next election he was able to come back, and he was able to gain the American people with his charm and charisma. And in 1984, the election comes around, and Ronald Reagan wins it. He wins it big. He wins every single state except Minnesota and the federal district of the District of Columbia, Washington D.C., which is not a state. But he manages to win. He manages to win the election in a huge landslide, biggest landslide in the history of the United States, most electoral votes ever, and he actually only loses Minnesota by 3,000 votes. So it could have been a 50-state landslide, which would have been crazy. But of course, that did not happen. So yeah, what you need to take away from this video is Jimmy Carter he was elected president after Ford, who really didn't have a very good chance, seeing that he had taken over from Nixon, who was unpopular. He basically had to pardon Nixon, and he was never elected to the presidency. He didn't really have the best chances. So you can see that Jimmy Carter was set. It seemed like he was set, but then he was just put in a lot of bad situations. Really, the only thing that I can blame on him is the gas prices, in my opinion. You can't really blame him for inflation and the Iran hostage crisis, but he had to be present through them, which caused him to lose the election to Ronald Reagan, who managed to take advantage of that. Yeah, in 1980 he managed to win huge, and he almost won even bigger if it wasn't for John B. Anderson, who ran as an independent and managed to take votes away from Reagan. And you could actually tell that event was a huge one of the biggest examples of the split between center Republicans and more right wing Republicans, which exists still this day. It's existed for the last 60, 70 years. Really since the 60s, we've had the split between conservatives and moderates, which exists to this day in the form of Trump types and Romney types, the rhinos and the populists. Um, so, and he was a fairly popular president, and he managed to beat Walter Mondale in 1984 by a huge landslide, biggest landslide in history of the United States, electorally wise. So, yeah. So, yeah. As always, this is just my opinion. My name is Naive Libertarian Politics, so take everything with a grain of salt. Expect more videos to come. There should be another video coming out today. So, yeah. So, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.